So we have a number of analog waveforms here. So the usual sine, triangle, saw, and PWM, which is pulse width modulation. And that sounds quite steppy while I'm actually editing it like that. But if we assigned it to an LFO or something, it would sound much, much smoother. Then we also have a number of extra waveforms here. These are the same again, but they have a synchronized oscillator, a hidden synchronized oscillator. And now this parameter will give us control over the interval of the two oscillators. And while we're here, I'll explain a couple of the shortcuts on the keyboard. So if you control click this, it'll reset to its default value. If we hit alt click, we get a nice fader. And if we hit shift and then click, we get very fine control. The same is true if you use a scroll wheel. Okay, next we have these other CM variants here. Let's take a listen to that. So it's very similar to FM. It's cross modulation. So the pitch does suffer when you do that, so you have to very finely tune it if you want it to stay in tune. And finally we have the XOR. These are very, very aggressive computations on the waveform. And they sound a bit like a mix between the sync and the FM. Again, it's something you're going to have to be careful with tuning. So you can get a lot of very interesting texture and variation out of these. You just have to tune them to the regular pitch. So here's where the fine tune comes in handy. To create some really interesting effect there with the beating of this oscillator and this one. Now that is a lot more interesting than just a normal waveform by itself, or even one mixed with another waveform. So let's fine tune that a little. Okay, so then we have the sub-oscillator. This brings in an oscillator below the others. And you can hear that it's independent of the octave here. It's actually dependent on the root key. So it's always going to be an octave below whatever root key you set. We also have some pulse widths here. And then we have ring modulation. So what this will do is multiply oscillator 1 and 2. Or we could switch it to 1 and 3. Or the sub-oscillator in 3. So a lot of cool things you can do with that as well to spice things up. Can get really, really quite nasty and digital, but that's part of the fun. Then we've got the noise waveform here. And a couple of choices, pink, white, then bandpass versions. I quite like that. You add that with a little bit. You mix that in slightly with a normal oscillator. So just a little bit of dirt. So that can be really handy when you're creating sounds. Now, the other thing I want to show you here is really cool. You've got this MO, which is multi-oscillator mode. So if we click on this, it's now active, but it's not doing anything yet until we go to the edit mode and start to play with the parameters. So of course, oscillator stacking. It's similar to Unison, but much less CPU intensive because it's only working on the oscillators, whereas Unison works on the entire voice, which includes filters, LFOs, and everything else. So here's the multi-oscillator mode. We increase the voices by bringing this up here. And then the detune as well brings it out. Then we have panning. This is actually the stereo spread, so at 0 it's mono. And then at 100, of course, it spreads it out really wide. We'll leave that at 0 just for now. We'll go to free phase, then we go to random phase. These are going to sound pretty much the same for the most part. But randomizing the phase means that every time we hit a note, we're going to get a new random phase start point. Free phase just allows the oscillator to continuously to do its thing and go from positive to negative. Fixed phase will actually make the oscillator reset from a set point, so whichever point in the phase we choose here. Now what this does is if you have a number of oscillators stacked, well, I'll just let you hear it. Get that really lasery sound. So what this basically allows you to do is get a punchy start. And you can also fine-tune the beginning of the phase to find out where it best fits with other oscillators. So if you've got two oscillators that are actually both on fixed phase, let's switch this to a triangle. What you might find very often is moving the phase around of one of them will give you a clearer, better bass, because you can run into phase cancellation, of course. So having control over the phase just avoids that, gives you a consistent hit on each note. But when you do activate it with unison in particular, you're going to get this lasery sound, which is not altogether bad. But for a lot of people, of course, the free phase is going to be what does it for them. Okay, so we've taken a look at the voice control and the oscillator section. I think that's quite good for now. We'll take a little break and we'll come back for the next video. Thanks for watching.